Welcome everyone to the workshop of telling and presenting your story. I am Wedad Anbtawi, the organizer of this workshop on behalf of FruitPunch AI and JADS. This workshop will be given by Koen Smeets. Koen, did I say your name correctly?
Very, very close, but it's one of the closest ones from, notice that everyone about the Netherlands have a lot of trouble with it, so this is very, very good.
Okay, so now the floor is yours.
Thank you. So yeah, like Wedad said, my name is Koen Smeets, and I'm going to tell you how to tell and present your story. So, so first a little bit about me. I'm an honors student in economics at Radboud University. This year I have written I've participated in an individual honors project for which I've written a paper under the guidance of Professor Miriam Sent. He's also a senator in the PvdA, the Labour Party. And this year next year will be really busy with my thesis on AI and economics, specifically the effects of full automation by AI, and of that the social and economic consequences. And related to this pitch, I've been asked to tell you more about how you basically can best tell your story, since I mentored with this in one of the MIT challenges, and my team was also one of the winners in the Latin American MIT challenge. So first I have 3 very quick tips for you. Firstly, make sure you got good lighting on your face. Right now I did on purpose, I didn't do it perfectly. So for instance, when I open my blinds, you can see my face a lot better. This is a huge difference in my opinion. And it's really important because this accentuates your facial features and things like that. The same goes for lighting, which you put directly onto your face. That's really, really important. Second tip is very closely related. It's to make sure that you have something under your laptop, because you want to put your camera a little bit higher. So for instance, I have here a very, very big book, which I'm sure each of you has as well. And if you put this under your laptop, you're not looking down upon the people you're presenting with. You're looking at them. It's a very, very big difference. It's a huge recommendation. Now, another tip, right now I'm looking at the slide, the picture, and even if I'll be looking at one of you, you will have no personal connection at all, basically. And this is, in my opinion, a huge issue. So what you should do is make sure that you can actually put it a little bit higher, so you feel a lot more personal connection. And there's something very closely related to that, and that is to also look into your webcam. So a lot of times it's not possible because you have to read the text. Most of the time you can look directly into the webcam, and this can be a little too intense, so you do want to change it around a bit, but you feel far more personal connection. It's one of the strange things of digitally presenting, because the closest connection you can have is not when you look into someone's eyes, but when you actually look at it just into the camera. And this is my most important tip. Don't just tell information, tell me your story. I know we have a lot of people, especially from technical backgrounds, and you guys have done probably the most amazing research and wanted to convey this to the audience. But to convey this right, you want to tell them a story. Most of you will focus on, you have a tendency to focus on the information, the technicalities, and just the impressive things that you have built. But this is a huge issue, because I need to understand basically what you have built. And for yourself, you're so in the details. It's really, really hard for you to, because you know your own story, so to say. But you have to tell me your story. You've chosen to do this for a reason, this whole project. And you have to tell me why. In other words, you have to explain to me why you care to make me care. That's what I want to above all tell you guys. So give me the reason why I care about your research. Explain to me why it's such an important thing, why society should care about this. And then don't give me like a huge swath of information. Tell me your story. And when I mentored, I also saw this really often, that people had a really, really cool idea, and I asked them a question, and they basically took out like a big UN report and they started to read from that. No, just explain to me also your reasoning and your thinking and just your story. And related to that, I want today bring you to 3 very quick. I want to bring you to 3 things that I built related to this. The first is the winning pitch from the MIT challenge. The second is the presentation I gave for a congress. And the third is something which also closely relates to your research. It's a lecture based on paper. Now, related to each of these 3, I think it's very important to point out that the format that you're choosing and the type of presentation you will be giving is dependent on your time constraints and what you're exactly presenting. So you will also notice that with each of three. So the first one only had 3 minutes. The second one I had 10, and the last one had 40. So you see very different levels of story, and you're also going to see me missing all kinds of details because I'm missing information, or because I'm missing time. And you will also see that when I have more time, it will go far more in detail, and I will still have a good story, but I have a lot more detail. So related to that, I want to first bring you towards one of the, am I stuck in this specific slide? I'm not sure. I wanted to use a different slide. 1 second. To get it here. Yes. If I'm correct, you can still see all of this. So the reason why I used a different presentation because of the letter type, you can see that after. So I'm going to keep it in this format because then I am assured that I have the right text. This is another trick. In your notes, you can actually put your text. So when you present it digitally, often the other person will be controlling your slides. And then you can actually just focus on your text. So I'm now going to give you this 3-minute presentations. The other presentation I'm not going to give, but since 3 minutes, you can really see how we built this. And what I want you to focus on is the extent to which I tell a story. So I'm not conveying information, I'm telling a story. So let's start. Imagine having to choose between feeding your family and keeping the bike you use to deliver everything you sell. No one should have to go through that decision. But all across Latin America, small business owners are facing this reality. We ask why. Why don't they have another choice? The answer is the curse of the informal economy. 34% of GDP and 50% of Latin American workers come from the vast informal sector comprised of SMEs. They're unregistered, the employees have no benefits, and they have no access to critical financing infrastructure. This is a major barrier helping these businesses get on their feet. What Latin America needs is a digital upgrade. That's where we come in, with that amigo. And we believe we can use the COVID crisis to kickstart the digitalization of informal Latin America. Let's invest in your SME, and you need to financing to help your businesses recover. Right now, the government doesn't know you exist, and neither do private lenders. So how can we help private lenders expand into the informal market and simultaneously incentivize informal SME digitalization? We need a two-step process. A way to evaluate the creditworthiness using limited information, and an incentive for SMEs to digitalize. That Amigo uses innovative data to establish creditworthiness. We can look, for instance, at how regularly our customers contact their close friends and how long they spend reading the terms and conditions in satellite data. These systems have surprisingly high repayment rates and have been used in Kenya and the Philippines. Along with private lenders, we can now provide initial loans to recovering businesses, but we can go one step further. That's where a company called Stone comes in. Stone sells POS devices, point-of-sale devices, that validate and record sales. The device is affordable, costs as little as $49 a month, paid over 12 months. So what can we do with this? If we incentivize SMEs to purchase and use POS devices through favorable loan terms, for example, upon activation in the first sale of the POS, SMEs will have a 2-month grace period on repayments. We can digitalize informal SMEs. The POS sale data from the SMEs, lenders can have greater visibility into their business, giving them a better understanding of the risk and lowering the cost of future credit for SMEs. This is an amazing solution that modernizes the economy. For SMEs, they lower the cost of credit. Private lenders expand their market reach. And Stone expands their client base and promotes the formal economy. All this is powered by Datamigo. Building a solution won't be easy, but we are the best team for the job. We're diverse, hailing from Latin America, Europe, and Central Asia. We have Dana's incredible work at KPMG, auditing Peruvian business, and Wilna Tools, deep expertise in data engineering. From a legal know-how to our financial expertise, our team is ready to go. So what you see here is that we really focus on telling a story. There's a lot of technical information, a complex algorithm, and well, we have many AI experts. You know how complex it is to tell this type of stuff. But we're focusing on the idea behind this. And the reason for that is, of course, we have 3 minutes. We need to also explain to the jury why they should pick us. And we do have all the technical info. We have the experts. We just have it like in a big document. And we know what we're going to get a couple of questions from the judges. And we can answer these with the info in the document. And you also see how we built this presentation that we mostly focused on pictures. And the reason, this is also really, really important advice. I've seen people with, say, a slide just filled with information like this. They basically take this slide and they have a lot of information, but it's just text. And then they're also talking. The worst I've seen are people that actually also then talk about something else. So I'm completely confused. Should I listen to them or should I read the text? And I'm kind of do both, of course, and I get confused. And then they go to the next slide and I haven't heard a thing. This is a huge recommendation for you to actually use a lot more pictures. And this is also a good example. This is the only technical thing basically in this slide. You see a mock-up from our product. It's the only mock-up we have. We don't have a lot of them, just one very good one. And you see that we have a lot of information on the, which is on there, but we also don't go in detail on this because we don't have the time, but it is on there. So what you have on there should be right, just limit it. And these type of little graphs are also really good. Just don't overcomplicate them. Good pictures again, but also make clear what you're talking about. That's very important. And also just like simple graphs and also representative of people. So if you're talking about Latin America, you don't want to use a guy that looks like me. That's just don't use that kind of picture. Look for someone that represents your group. Also, with these type of pitch challenges, it's really, really important to emphasize why they should pick you. And they're going to see amazing ideas. So you want to emphasize why your team is great. And we did that to also mention our universities. We could have mentioned companies, and also how diverse we are. And just that's just cool stuff. So make sure to include that as well. So I will now go back to the presentation. And the reason that I did this is to also show you something else. Because here it is the case that I use a different letter type. I basically just let them copy the slides in. I noticed something was off, but it took me a couple of seconds to figure it out. Letter type. And you see how important that is. This is way, this is really, really different, the type of presentation it is with just these type of letters. So it's a really small change, but also notice which letter type you're using. So, and then you notice at the end again, that this is a recommendation to keep it in mind. So going to the next presentation. This is a presentation I've done for a Congress. It's in Dutch. I know a lot of non-Dutch people here. And the reason for that is once you focus on structure. So this is a presentation. You see it immediately. It's like a library type of thing. It's specifically from my university. And I'm going to also talk to something related to that, the campus. It's also called Campus Day. And this is a logo. And this is on a side note, a template, which I use a lot for my presentations. I really, really like it. And I always edit it a bit that it works. It's also the template you saw at the beginning. And this is also a recommendation. Don't use your little white, like the standard white presentation or just a single color. And then it's a recommendation to use a template. Sometimes a color may work really well, but make sure it's clear and it's clean. So you see that here as well. And so what you see here is that this is about Campus Day. And I always like to start again with a presentation with a slide that tells a little bit about me. And then I also emphasize whatever is most relevant. So here I don't emphasize, for instance, that I worked under a senator, as an incent, but I emphasize my work as an outreach coordinator at a Dutch organization with advocates for different education. And also while I was there, I had written an article in the student newspaper. So this is about basically that we're missing the campus and no one is there. So I use an appropriate picture. I use a picture of an empty campus, my campus as well. So you see it here as well, just how important it is that these things align. Another tip is to, you see it with the text here as well. So I press once and then more text appears. When you have a lot of text, sometimes you're gonna have to put a lot of text in. Also because you want to have yourself the reminders in your story. Then make absolutely sure that you have, that you can basically make it bullet points. And a little trick, if you say using a different program and you're unable to put this type of animation in, here it can. You can make separate slides. You can do one slide with just one bullet pointed text, and the next slide with 2 bullet pointed text, this slide 3 bullet points of text, and it seems to be basically natural bullet points, but actually it's just different slides. And you see as well, so this is an empty campus, and this is a campus under construction. This is also closely related to the topic of the slide, basically the campus being a place of construction for yourself. Here's a place of meeting. Again, you see a very similar picture. Also use different campuses, so take that type of stuff into account when you're doing this. basically a campus of an exploration, so it's people exploring. And how does this make our place? So you see a lot of people together on this campus. So those are basically for a 10-minute congress. You see as well that I still try to keep it visual, but I can put more info, more text in. And here also I can go a little bit more in detail, but I am still missing a lot of stuff. And in the other presentation, you saw it as well. We had a lot of technicalities, but we simply skipped that because we don't have the time. And that's, I think, really, really important to keep in mind when you're doing this. And also always end with such a slide. So thank you for your attention. And what I also like to do on my slides, and I will go back on when you see it again, is to also just put the logo just again and again, because I think it looks really, really nice. It reminds you what you're looking at, the campus day. So that's, in my opinion, such a format is something you could use. And again, you can do your Gmail there, or what you're using, and your LinkedIn. And this is actually a presentation which will be close to what you guys do as well. It's a presentation I gave at the organization, I'm also outreach coordinator, Rethink Economics NL. And it's a presentation on my personal research, which I've conducted under the Professor and Senator. And this is something I start with as well. So I explain, well, this is what the research is based on. I show a picture of who I'm working under, and then I explain the topic. So here you see again the storyline. So it's still research, but basically I start with why they should care. Why does this interest me? And you guys have it as well. You have probably done some sort of amazing research, some way too complex program, which you will never understand. So start with telling me why I should care, right? Start with telling me what's so interesting about your topic. And for me, for instance, it's inequality. So you see a huge spike in inequality, and I wanted to understand why. And you see, this is something that also triggers an emotional aspect. This is the way that we evolve, to basically care about little stories instead of just a lot of. I can just explain, I can name all these numbers, but yeah, no, it's just as risen. And it's made a drop and it's risen. Why? So that's basically it. And then I think it's really, really interesting. So I'm going to consider that, and I'm going to do it to this philosopher, and I include a picture of the philosopher, which covers the little graph. And then this is actually one of the most difficult slides from the presentation, what to make. Basically, one of the issues I had is that I'm presenting for a group of people that had no experience and knowledge of economics, and actual experts, like people, some of my teachers from my university. So that's tricky. And the reason it's tricky is because you have to make sure that the people that have no understanding of economics can follow it, but the people that do don't fall asleep. That's a difficult combination. How you do it, in my opinion, is that you take basically the basic concepts for your research and you explain those again. And I actually do it with a joke. I actually start them with, don't worry, it's not going to become a boring economics lecture, but just sit with me for 2 minutes. And I explain this graph. With this graph, I can explain everything else. And I also include it another couple of times because it's a good visual reminder. Also, to bring you back to something I said earlier, see also that I have included the logo here of Rethink Economics each slide. And you see this here as well. So you see the graph here and the supply demand. And I explain just that graph, and I explain the basics of it. And I go to my research question. And then I explain what we're going to do today. And this is also something I often use in my slides. And these are bullet points because there's a lot of text. And then I go to a couple of definitions which you need to know. And again, minimal amount of text, just something you can actually read with me while I'm actually going through it. So the animations, and you see competition and alloy with monopoly elements. So this is basically just a definition from the paper I'm citing. Explain what it implies. So basically explain, this is for my storyline, explain basically, well, these are boring definitions, but what do they mean? Why it's so important to know these. Because there's a reason for you as well, what you're putting that in. And then I go to Foucault's analysis of neoliberalism. Again, I'm not expecting you to understand my research in any way. I just want you to understand what I'm presenting. To explain the origin of economic competition, it's related to justice. So I try to use Lady Justice as a good example. Then I explain again, I go back to this graph because it's important for them to understand it. So like the aha, visual reminder. And then I explain the side is the side of justice and then the differences and such. And here I use another visual trick. So you have a very famous motive in both literature and in mythology and in movies, etc. And why I find it also really helpful with Greek mythology is something I really like to use, because it's speaking to people and it's a good story. And here you see it as well. So this is from Picasso, from his famous painting Guernica. And it represents basically a mother holding her dead child. And this is really famous because it's from the Bible. You have very similar. In the Bible, you have Maria holding Jesus after he's, I think, laid down from the cross. And I use here really more of a chaotic version, the version of Picasso. And it also closely relates to the topic, because ordoliberalism, unlike the next one, is really focused on imperfections. So it's an imperfect paper. You have to think about it, that's yourself correct. And then to very quickly go to the next slide, you see here a perfect one. And this is from Michelangelo, it's Pieta. And it actually represents exactly what it described, the Bible, the motive from the Bible. And you see here that it's a perfect one. So it's a nice little way to combine your story and to basically bring a motive in it, and for people to also remain aware of what you're telling. Also, perhaps using a similar slide, I have not pointed this out earlier, but it's always good to use 3. And 3 is a very, very great number. The reason for that is you see it everywhere. You see it in, sorry, I think we have an ambulance coming by. You see it in, oh, wait 1 second. It's gone. So you see it everywhere. You see it in mythology. You see it in basically everything. A lot of times you use 3. It's a really, really well working number. You see it more often. So again, you see 3 bullet points. And they're also similarly constructed. Like the second one also talks again about pure competition. Third one about the government. And here you see that as well. So the second one is perfect competition. And the third one is, if I'm explaining, it's very closely related to government. Then I have a little graph which I like to put in. It actually is 4. So I broke my own rules. Sometimes you're going to get away with it. So here you actually see a graph which I don't explain. But here I don't include it, and the reason is why it just gets really chaotic. So I decided to make a new slide for it. Here's another motif I use. It's from Bos, the 7 Deadly Sins, from gluttony, and I also use greed. And originally I actually used Doré here. And Doré is also, in my opinion, a beautiful painting. But the issue with it is that you have basically no... that it was a little too visual, so to say. It's a bit the way it really depicts it very visually with the hell, so to say, and it's just too visual. So I decided to go with this more modest, friendly, child PG-13 version of gluttony. So keep it in mind when you're choosing your pictures. I have another great example at the end. So here you again see that I bring back the model. Why? To basically remind them of that. You see it very often in the presentation. And here you see it as well with like with the greed, that I include that information here. And I include a graph. I can actually just bring it over, then I remove it again, then I talk a bit more, and I just put one less thing in, which I remove, and then talk a bit more, and then I go to the conclusion. So I give a summary. You see 3 bullet points again. I bring back this graph to start. Well, this is basically what we talked about at the beginning. How do we understand this now in the context of these things? So basically make sure you have a good line in your story, and at the same time it's so also to make it clear and understandable for both the beginners and the experts, and also interesting, of course, for the experts. So why has the basic model not been updated? So explain that. Why should we update it? So you see this little story that's in there. And then I added this case with a quote, which I think was really relevant here. And then I had the discussion slide in, because I wanted to do a discussion after. Wasn't sure whether anyone would come up with questions, so just to be sure. And again, I have my little context slide. So that's for me the most important stuff with the ones which you cover today. And the last thing I also want to emphasize is that you can put in additional slides, because you're going to get questions. And then it's really great if you have just slides, again, with a picture, and where you just have some preparation for the questions. You can just go to the slide, and then you can talk about it. And this was, for instance, not that well covered. Again, this is often, you have a beautiful painting, one of the 13 black paintings, of Saturn devouring his son. And it's it's way too visual. So instead I use this more friendly painting to explain basically the rudeness of competition, that it's just that basically it's like devouring whoever stands in your way, no matter what. and they'll explain it that way. And I also was expecting question monopoly, so I then go to the historical development of that. So the same you see here, again, those little motifs with the paintings and the sculptures, I should say, as well. And that was for me the most important info. So to summarize that, the context of your presentation, the type of presentation you're giving, it depends on the type and the length. So you want to build like really, if you have a really long presentation, like for your thesis or your research, you can put in a lot more info. But when you're doing a pitch, just tell me just the story. You're not expected, and if you are, just put that info in, to give a very, very detailed explanation. Perhaps they want some financial statements or some other stuff. Just put that in, but just keep it to that. And the second point is also close related to that. Use pictures instead of text. So this actually applies everywhere. Make sure you got good visuals. So a nice template like this is really great. Again, for instance, now you're seeing the little FruitPunch icon there. And it's just the best way of building these things because it's visually appealing. People stay awake, people stay there. And it's just really, really important. And the last thing, and this is my most important point, again, you're seeing 3 points. Tell me your story, not just information. Tell me why I care. Tell me what's so interesting. Tell me not just about like the information on like the model works, but what it does and what is so cool about your AI and how it's applied, and give me something inspiring. And that for me the major points which I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for your attention. Again, I always put that in. And if you want to contact me, you can see it here. And we can now go to a Q&A session.
Thank you, Koen. So guys, if you have any question, you can unmute yourself and ask directly.
You can also ask me related to your own research. If you have something you're struggling with, you're thinking, how should I present that? Feel free to ask that specifically. So we have a question from Dana. Is it important to show the hands while you are talking? Well, I have 2 tips related to that. Firstly, think about when you are presenting digitally, really, really think about the way that your hands show. So this actually works the way that I'm doing it now. Also, it's in reverse. I have all the trouble with that. But for instance, when you're counting down, if I'm correctly, you want to do it this way. And the reason for that is because for me, I'm seeing the mirror version. So keep that in mind. And it's also really important that it can be really, really strange if you get too close, because this is a really, really strange way of presenting, right? So keep it in mind. It's still halfway from the, so it's close to, it's still halfway, especially if you get closer, it's even weirder. So keep it in mind where you keep your hands. Here it works, not here, because then you get a strange format. So that's for me is a major recommendation.
Hey, I have a question. My name is Mahdi. Thanks for your presentation. I recently attended to one of the this presentation last month, and the person who was presenting, he was standing. So he actually set up everything very well, but he was standing because I thought that he was more comfortable. Do you have any recommendation for people who are comfortable to stand and present?
Yeah, make sure, first of all, and I can show you this. So make sure you got a good, a fitting camera, because if I work this way, it just is weird, right? So I'm looking down and this doesn't work at all. So consider that. So you're gonna want to use, say, a standing desk, but you cannot hold your laptop the entire time like this. So make sure you use a standing desk, something along those lines. And like I mentioned earlier, make sure you got the right light. Make sure you have light coming directly onto your face, some sort of natural preferably, and also augmented right now with like a TL. You see the difference in my face when I put it off. So yeah, standing is perfectly fine, but consider camera angles and make sure you do that right. And then also consider, again, your hands, because then you're also going downwards perhaps. So keep such things in mind. That's, do you have anything else? Yeah, put your laptop a little higher. I think it's perfectly doable, but then I would, for instance, personally, I would have used my shelves. So keep in mind the environment that you have. I personally prefer sitting, simply because I think it is, I personally, it's a lot of trouble for me to keep it up, especially with a long presentation. Keep in mind that you have to keep standing then, and you don't want to start wiggling around or something.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
Regarding the information in the slides, if I've heard well, you said that it's important to tell the story rather than much of information, right?
Yeah, but there's of course always a mix, but I'm seeing sometimes people tell way too much info. And
Yes.
what I would recommend is to make sure that the information you're telling is relevant. That's sorry, but please ask your question. Just it's important indeed that you specify it.
I want to say that how much is, as this is too much. If I have to, for example, I have to say some numbers, some statistics. It's better to show diagrams in this way, for example.
Yeah, the way that I personally consider it, again, it's also a lot of stuff is personal preference. I do want to add that. But the way that I see this, for instance, here are 3 minutes, right? So I can only show you these two numbers, the powerful numbers. They get people thinking, they get people talking, and that's it. I don't have time for a lot more. Here, for instance, I can go into the details. I can, looking for the specific slide, this one. Here I can go into the details. I can explain to you how this is built up. I can explain to you how it works. And it also differs per background. So for instance, with, this is in economics, and this is far more qualitative analysis. So I'm going far less into the numbers and the details. It's simply there to support my story. When you're in AI or when you're in the beta scientist, you may want to put way more numbers in. But what I mostly mean to say is please don't keep repeating numbers and numbers and numbers and just slides of numbers, and that's
yes, and the ones who have who are short-sighted, cannot see such numbers and such the information. If it's overcrowded, I can't read it. For example, because it's I'm not watching face to face. I'm looking at a small screen, for example, on my phone. It will be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, that's also a recommendation. So when you have a table, please don't give me a table with like these type of letters. It's just awful. And I have no idea where to look. Again, it's exactly like when you put way too much text in and you're talking. I have no idea what I should look at. So perhaps like mark the relevant numbers, mark the relevant parts, just basically crop out just into that part of the table. Just don't put like a huge table. That's just, in my opinion, it's really important to avoid that as well. So this table, for instance, I'm not going to explain to you 25, 50%. That's perhaps also an answer to your question. I don't need to explain it. I just need to show it's a drop, and I just need to show it's large. And then I do need to say the time period. I need to say that what time we're considering. So I can just be, because it's big. It's huge, to quote our very good friend from United States. And so yeah, does that answer your question a bit?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. So I saw we also had a question in the chat. What do you think about using animation PowerPoint presentations to illustrate a certain process? How much of animation is typically acceptable? Yeah, again, I think it comes down with personal preferences, the type of presentation and what you can get away with. I would like to keep, I think it is important to emphasize what type of animations we're talking. Text animations, please don't use like spitting text and like spinning graphs and things like that. That's just don't use sound. Please don't do that. So that's an important one. So related to, for instance, I actually use animations as well, you might have noticed. For instance, with this one, I use an animation to bring in the person I'm working under. And it's actually you could say pretty complex animation. And it's, yeah, you can see it. It's but it's not that distracting and it works. And the reason for that is that it's, I use it minimally, so to say. I just use it once and I use it to illustrate something, to basically bring your attention to something. I'm not going to use a spinning one or something that's just awful. Personally, I prefer to use also the text. You see it as well. I actually put it as fast as possible. Well, not that it's like it just jumps in, but as fast as possible, the quick animation. And I personally think that works best. And the same goes for this one. I think it is relevant, and you can also use different ones. You can personal preference, but I personally have a preference for nothing too visually appealing. It should be beneficial to your story, and it should basically. I think that a good thing to keep in mind, basically a good focus point, is that does this support my story, or does this bring my attention to something very specific, or is it simply flashy? If it's just flashy, please keep it out, because there's no reason for you to put it in. You want to put it in only when it supports your presentation. Does that answer the question a bit? Mariam. Okay. Do we have further questions? Really happy to see that we have so many active questions. You're free to also say it out loud, to type in the chat. It's all good. So perhaps.
Can I ask another question?
Of course. Might have very quickly give one point. It's actually something I was just reminded of. Also, make sure you don't have too many slides. I actually saw people, for instance, I saw this post on LinkedIn, and it was also like a guy that said that they had like 45 slides, and then the coach also said, please scrap some. And he said, yeah, but if we scrap some, I'm gonna miss information. And he said, well, if you don't scrap them, you're gonna miss everything. And that's really, really true. I also mentored the group, and they had like 34 slides when I came in, and I told them, please scrap some. This is not going to work. And I came back the next day, and they said, yeah, we scrapped some. Okay, how many do you have now? And this is a 3-minute presentation, guys. So 31. Guys, that doesn't work. And they also didn't, it's really chaotic. So please make sure that you don't have too many slides when you're presenting. And you won't want to, especially when you have to say it, you don't want to say next, and you get completely insane. So, but yes, Serena, you had another question?
Actually, I was going to comment regarding the animation. You know, there are some PowerPoints that use, for example, like Powtoon and some of these features. You know, the Powtoon, the one who talks alone and writes alone.
I don't think I know. Could you quickly look it up?
Never mind. It's something that you can use to make a PowerPoint presentation, but it has animations. For example, a cartoon picture who talks, and a pen that writes, etc.
Yeah, I think it can work. It's really, really dependent on the specific situation.
But there's something about it that if we have a weak connection, like here in Lebanon, for example, that cuts off a lot, maybe it wouldn't be a right choice, right?
Yeah, I think it's also connection is something to keep in mind. It's so for instance, I also saw people, for instance, using like a video, and there was an awful connection, and there was like this crappy little video, and it's a good idea, but consider basically the constraint that you're working with. So if you have an animation and it has to load from your own presentation, from your own computer, and then to the web, for instance, I'm using an Ethernet cable. So always use an Ethernet cable if you have it available. And especially if you're working from, say, Lebanon, and you have to give a presentation in the Netherlands, keep in mind that you may have a bad internet connection, and then it's better to use certain type of things, or actually use specifically certain types of things as well. Consider basically what the conditions you're working under.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much.
Of course. Are there any further questions?
I think we can end it from here. Thank you all for attending the workshop. Thank you, Koen, for giving the workshop. And if you want to send us feedbacks, feel free to, because you have my email already. So thank you all.
And feel free to add me on LinkedIn or send me an email if you have any further questions or any recommendations. I'd love to hear. Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.